I had a rough past. I lost my ability to trust other humans and sheltered myself together with my minion creations as my only companions. But ever since I found you, there's something about you that just makes me want to be near you, get to know you. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I would also love to get to know you better.
Really? It makes me so glad.
But there's a thing we need to do first before we can get to know each other better. In this definitely two-sided and good for my mental sanity relationship.
Well, okay. Anything.
Great!
Where did you get that microphone
Who's ready
from?
for more Necromancy Games?
What the?
She agreed to review more Necromancy games with me. Guys, more Necromancy video games. It's been way too long again. There's too many games for too little time, so I hope you're ready.
What?
Because it's time for more peak
Excuse
gaming
me?
with the best gameplay style. Whew, yeah, we are instantly starting with a banger today. Be My Horde is what happens if Right Click to Necromance would have been developed further after its game jam. Because it's basically that, with a progression system. And our hot Necromancer waifu that says demeaning things to you when you talk to her. This is already a masterpiece. If you see me talking about right click to necromance, you basically already know how this game works. You press the assigned button to reanimate corpses, run around on the field, and let your minions auto-attack enemies to then resurrect them, and you continue that until the continuously stronger and more aggressive getting enemies overpower you. With the biggest difference in game being that the Necromancer is actually partaking on the battlefield instead of just being an omnipotent being. This also means your run doesn't just simply end if you run out of minions. If you play well enough, you can actually try and resurrect stray corpses and make a comeback, even if that most of the time doesn't work, at least in the beginning. The run only ends if your Necromancer gets hit too much, where she first loses clothing. After that her skin, and then she dies. The game also has a progression system where you can upgrade basically everything about your character. From the amount of units being summoned on click, the summoning time, your health, speed, and even a bunch of skills you can select to create different builds. And some of these effects can be complete game changers. Like making sheep spawn on the map that once turned explode on kill. Basically taking out everything in the vicinity with them. Or the ability to automatically summon minions itself. Which, with combination with a maxed out summoning speed, can just completely break the game. You can definitely feel that the game is still in early access. It doesn't really take long for you to have upgraded everything that currently is here to maximum. And after that point you can just try and beat your personal time record. Personally, I got to the point where the mages spawn that throw out fireballs that just annihilate your entire army in seconds. I get a few of them to join my army, but after the 4th or 5th one, it's basically over. I'm definitely excited to see how Be My Horde develops in the future. I'm definitely gonna continue making a few runs from time to time. Hello. Editing blur here. I fired up the game again after quite some time after recording this entire segment because I wanted to capture a little bit of the music for the background. And I may have noticed that they changed quite a few systems. Like, they changed the model of the Necromancer. She looks a lot nicer with better animations. She also can now wear different costumes. But I have noticed that they changed the entire skill system to the way that you cannot even like equip certain perks anymore and instead have a pretty standard leveling system that is normal for these types of survivor games. I don't know if I prefer it or not. Your runs can definitely get a lot stronger now, also because you can just simply get way more than before. With you now, instead of being limited to just a few, you have to pick out of a bigger group. You're now basically just getting stronger and stronger every few seconds to minutes, so that's pretty cool. It also basically made this entire segment of me talking about the skill system completely outdated and worthless, but that's what happens when it takes you multiple months to make a single video. But hey, at least I would say that speaks for the developers. They are definitely very actively and quickly working on the game and making it better, so... What did I rank my right click to Necromance? I think it's just fair to put this one on the tier above. Yeah. Minecraft is such a classic, isn't it? I don't really think I have to introduce this game to anyone here, right? At least I hope not. So it also shouldn't surprise anyone that there are a bunch of Necromancy themed mods for the game. And the beautiful member of the community, Lanternlight,
Hello.
actually made a server for us on the public Discord. Entirely themed around the concept. And it definitely was a really interesting experience. First of all, you were able to choose from a list of races, but all have their own unique quirks around them. With me obviously having picked the one that allows you to summon undead, the Revenant. We just decided to nerf this race pretty early on because the class had no summon limit, and the resource it needed to summon was also bugged, meaning you could just spam the key to summon infinite zombies, which was hilarious, but obviously not really intended, so that was sadly changed pretty quickly. Other than that, the game is basically just Minecraft, but with a few extra character skills. Well, okay, next to the new blocks, the new crafting stations, the weapons from Bloodborne, a bunch of new enemies, bosses, portals that teleport you into pocket dimensions that have little puzzles that throw you into a hellish limbo filled with nothing but terrifying music, black floating islands and eyes that watch you if you fail the puzzles. And obviously, the god entity on the server that you were able to talk to and bargain with. But other than those things, everything was pretty standard. I know I just listed a bunch of things, even though I said it's just standard Minecraft as a joke, but I'm being pretty honest here. You still have your very normal Minecraft experience with mining, crafting and building, just with a little bit extra flair and new challenges, which definitely was really nice. But I don't think anyone is going to be blown away by Minecraft with Necromancy, which doesn't mean that the mods weren't impressive. I never really dabbled with Minecraft mods before this, to be totally honest, but I knew how crazy they can actually get. I already talked about the pocket dimensions that made me almost shit my pants live on camera, but the fact you can fight a massive undead creature that just summons continuous waves of ghouls that chase you was just cool. Even though it literally rained down so many of these mobs that my game just crashed. But hey, it was still cool. What definitely blew me away though was what you guys built on the server. I'm not really creative in these games and basically settle with like a small shack on an island, while some of you decided to build ridiculous underground structures that just made my jaw drop. That was probably what I enjoyed most with this. Yeah, being able to have more complex combat with more interesting enemies was nice, but I still just love seeing what people can create in this game. And that's why Minecraft mods are gonna get an A rank from me. You never can go wrong with Minecraft in general, and mods for my favorite class just made it even better. Sadly, Lantern had to shut down the server for personal reasons a while ago. But don't be sad if you missed your chance to be able to be a part of it, because I have set up something different for you. A V-Rising server. The game has been in its 1.0 for a while now, and it also has an entire skill tree centered around necromancy. So I bought a public server for 1 year, and everyone that wants to join can do that by simply joining the Discord through the link in the description and going to the V-Rising channel for the address and password. I really hope I'm going to see you there so that you can be a part of this experience, and that I'm able to talk about the entire thing once the year expires. Necroking is one of these... It's super simple but also super addicting types of games. You are the name giving Necroking and are summoned into the kingdom to dethrone the evil king and free the people of his tyranny. And how do you do that? By walking across the map and playing Yu-Gi-Oh! You use bones to walk around the map and can walk over graveyards to get units. And to get more bones, you have to raid villages, towers, towns, basically everything you come across. The combat for this is relatively simple, unless you're me. The battlefield is split into 4 sections, with an arrow moving across them to indicate which section is currently active. You are on the left and the enemies are on the right, with both parties trying to move across the field to reach the other side. If units from both sides meet in the same section, they start attacking each other, with a number above the head indicating the health and damage simultaneously, meaning the damage output also goes down the more damage they take. You can place your units on the board whenever you want, without anything like waiting for your turn to start. The only thing that has turns here is the battlefield itself. This doesn't mean you can just spam your units though. They all have some requirements you have to meet. There's an amount of mana they cost, which regenerates over time, souls, which basically works as a limiter on how many units you can have on the field at once, and the number of fields they can be placed in. And this is where the challenge comes from. Setting up a field that can withstand the enemy waves without any of them being able to get to you and hurt your Necroking. Having attackers that can move up a bot quickly while also defending units in the back and support units that strengthen the others. And this, like I've already said, gets really addicting real soon. You just get sucked into this loop of exploring the map, gathering resources, fusing together units to create stronger ones and raid villages. You can even unlock more units in a skill tree. And you get the experience points by finding bosses on the map. It also works slightly differently because you don't have to just survive waves against bosses. You have to get to them, like they are trying to get to you. But this time with a turn limit. Because once you run out of turns, nightmares spawn that most enemies cannot even attack. So you're basically dead when that happens. Beating a run even unlocks new biomes on the map, like spider nests, swarms, or even hell gates. All with new units for the enemies, and also for you as well, that open up even more build options. You are getting a massive amount of content in this game, and that's while it's just like $5 on Steam. Necroking is an easy S tier for me, simply by how addicted it made me while playing. So, I think now is the perfect time to introduce the new segment I have promised in the last video, where we revisit old games that were already covered, that finally had their actual releases after the demo or being in early access. And let's just directly start with a game that basically made me kickstart this new segment, Throne of Bone. And from the beginning, the full version already feels better thanks to it actually supporting my native screen resolution now, but that's luckily not the only thing that's improved over the demo. Luckily, scratch that. Thankfully. Because oh my god, I love this. They improved basically every issue I had with them originally. I hope they also updated the demo after this because phew, it is not a good representation of how the game actually is now. And to start off with one of my biggest worries originally, that thankfully didn't out to be true, there's a really steep complexity curve that happens directly after the point where the demo ended. With your cards getting more complex, enemy strategies requiring more of you, and your build becoming genuinely ridiculous. And that is a genuinely. The only run that I played that I did not win was my very first one, but that could maybe also have been for another reason. More on that later though. The game in general just really starts after you reach the third area, which luckily doesn't really take that long once you understood how the game works and which cards work best with your playstyle. Even the Minotaur isn't a problem anymore after that, and almost nothing can stop you once you reach that point. Leveling up, getting spells that synergize well with your build, and just seeing it all unfold with your units activating their abilities and attacking everything. Overall, I'm just happy that I like the actual game so much more than the demo. The art is still amazing, and even the in-progress cards that still have unfinished artwork still look really fun and creative with the designs. The card variety in general is so cool, with so many fun and creative cards that offer so many different strategies for your builds. With you just unlocking even cooler ones in your run by leveling up. But it's not all positive. There is one massive thing I still feel pretty unsure about, and that's the character abilities. The demo already had 2 different characters you could play, and the full game now has a total of 6. All of them starting with a different card and having a special ability only they can use. For example, the Bone Collector you start the game with gives you an extra currency every time you merge 2 cards. The Soul Sorceress triggers her first equipped spell 2 times, and the Dread Knight can turn his monsters into knights. All very basic effects, but then there's the Flesh Smith. And she can merge 2 different monsters that already were fused once before, combining the races, classes, effects, and stats. And yes, that's exactly as broken as you fucking think it is. There are a lot of monsters that activate pretty strong effects if related cards do something. Related in this case meaning that another monster has the same race or class. So having monsters that have multiple races and classes is already ridiculous and can result in things like this, where I've used a card that gets a permanent damage buff every time a pumpkin creature I own takes damage, with a card that gets a health buff for the current match for every monster in general that I own and takes damage. And combined with a Godfather that just fills my entire field with fucking pumpkin cards when he dies, it didn't take long to get numbers as high as this. It is ridiculous and amazing. The problem is that it is by far the most overpowered ability, at least compared to the other ones I have unlocked yet. Who knows, maybe the last 2 characters also have broken abilities, but at least the other 3 feel completely underpowered in comparison. Which doesn't mean they can't have cool builds themselves. The Dread Knight turning all of your creatures into the same class can obviously be amazing for relation abilities, and being able to cast the same spell twice in a single turn can be broken as all hell, but still. The runs are significantly easier with a Flesh Smith compared to everyone else. So either she has to be nerfed, which would be like the less preferable option, or the others need stronger abilities. Like, come on, getting 1 currency per fusion is so worthless at a certain point where you are making enough money anyways. But overall, this is still a way more amazing experience than I had the last time, and I can't wait for the full version so that I can feature it again. I think the game really deserves an up rank for that. Here, I am so proud of you. Oh, this is a good one. I talked about Death Must Die also, while it only was a demo. And man, have things changed since last time I checked it out. There's a bunch more classes now, and they all also play somewhat differently with slightly different stats and attack patterns. And that's not the best part. They added skill trees. And they are actually also really fucking good. They completely change the playstyles of the characters. And because I like you so much, I played through the entire current state of the game until the end of Act 2 and leveled up the mage to max level to show off what she can do. Because she is the one that has the summoning specializations. You get skill points by killing bosses in the different acts and different stages, and it doesn't even matter if you have killed the boss before. They give you one every time. It's a pretty simple skill tree overall, and if you mainly level up the left row, you get a few fun extras, like being able to have more summoning skills simultaneously. 3 flame summons you start a run with, and a massive fire-breathing dragon that you also can have from the start of a run. And yeah, this definitely all is more summoning themed. The Necromancy ability in general itself is just the summoning skill you can get from the Death God in the game. It's still just so much fun though. Thanks to my skill tree, my summons deal massively increased damage while I am not attacking myself, but my attack also gets stronger and bigger if I haven't attacked in a while. And thanks to my gear, that gives me an increase in level up rerolls, I can basically cheese myself to having the Necromancy ability every run. Combined with crows that curse enemies, swords made out of blood, ice wolves, and even more fire spirits, which combined basically just trivialize the stages. Currently, there isn't really that much you can do after beating the 2 acts, but you can play the stages again with certain modifiers to make them more difficult while giving better rewards to optimize your gear, which definitely is giving people that care about that more to do. Overall, if you're willing to ignore that your summons aren't going to be only Necromancy themed, I can just recommend the game even more than I already did. Hell yeah, Nevermourn released, and I love it even more than I already did. It's still one of the coolest and most promising Necromancy roguelites for the foreseeable future. It's still so much fun to run around the maps, killing enemies, dying, leveling up, getting new spells, and more summoning slots, starting a new run, repeat. They even now has a skill tree that lets you make your offensive and supportive skills even better. They also added a map screen that shows you the different routes of a level to let you strategize more by knowing what path you are going down and what kind of reward you are going to get by clearing a room. They also added a few new room types, like the one where you stand before a projection of yourself that can give you a pretty good boon, but also giving you a bane in return. The enemy density also feels a lot higher than before. It definitely happened more than once in later rooms that it got kind of hard to tell what even is going on, due to just how much is happening simultaneously with all the attacks, effects, and everything just jumping around. Thankfully, the performance is way better than before though. I still wake up from cold sweat with the nightmares I am still having of the performance of the demo. I do really still love this game. If I had to criticize something, it's that the leveling feels a bit slower than before, and therefore the game can feel kind of boring in the beginning until you actually start to unlock at least your second major summoning slot. And then there's also that there's only 2 minor minions, the melee ones and the ranged ones, where there's a huge variety of major ones. But those things definitely can be changed until the full release, and I cannot wait to talk about it again once the 1.0 releases. Ha. The Unliving. Are your minions still dumb as a rock? Yeah. Here's a gold star. Never change. The game actually improved quite a lot ever since I talked about it last time. It also changed pretty dramatically in some aspects, which makes me pretty happy. They definitely took the best kind of advantage out of being a game that used early access. It would also be kind of bad if the game didn't fix some of its major issues, which I definitely would say they did. First of all, I can't really put my finger on it, but I am pretty sure they did something about the visibility. It just feels a lot better and it's easier to keep track of everything. That's because they actually tweaked the visibility of everything, or if they just did something with the enemy and minion AI, I don't know. There definitely have been changes though. The enemies attack you less often directly and your little army feels a tiny bit less brain dead, but just a tiny bit. A big part of the charm comes from how stupid they are. Your abilities also feel a lot nicer than before. They feel a lot more centered around you actually summoning more. Like getting a few temporary blood skeletons, or how about a massive flesh saw that just melts through enemies' health. The spells definitely feel a lot more useful now. The currency also feels easier to obtain, meaning it's easier to get health back, which could get pretty frustrating earlier due to health restoration being super fucking rare to find outside of shops. The upgrade system for your main attack was changed to now simply require you to kill a certain amount of enemies with a certain weapon to unlock new things in the tree. And speaking of the hub, next to it still offering a ridiculous amount of unlockable skills and abilities for future runs, also has the Binding Crucible now, which allows you to flat out give yourself and your minions percentage-based buffs to stats. And I'm not talking about, ooh, 2% more damage if you farted on a Sunday while the sun was down. No, we're talking about the real man shit. How about straight up doubling your fighter minions' health? 30% more mana? Or your own damage being increased by 100%? All of this also stacks up, which can really make the future runs a lot more manageable. There's also the Ascension Throne now, which I am unsure if it's new or not, but I didn't mention it when I talked about the game for the first time, so I just wanted to mention it here. And it can be probably best described as basically being the mirror from Hades 1. Although the game definitely isn't perfect and still has its issues, with certain things not really working properly at the most inconvenient times, I definitely think it's worth the price it is asking for. Don't know if they're still gonna add new major things or if the game is still being developed on. According to the Steam reviews, we basically finished up what was already there and then basically just abandoned it once the 1.0 hit. But I definitely got my money's worth, so I'm not gonna complain too much. And that's it for the games I wanted to talk about for a second time for this video. This is probably not gonna become a staple section in every Necromancy video from now on. Rather, it's just gonna be something I do every time I feel like enough games I have covered had their full release by now. I definitely would also appreciate if you guys would keep me up to date in the comments on games I've already covered that had some major updates. But okay, it's time for some new games, finally. This game is very interesting to me. This was actually one of the most requested games from the last few videos. People really wanted me to play this one, and it definitely intrigued me because on the one hand it's like one of the simplest and honestly also ugliest RPGs I have ever played. It looks like a badly made RPG Maker game with no animations, but on the other hand, God, I wish I would have known about this game so much earlier. Tales of Maj'eyal is probably one of the coolest dungeon crawler games I have played in a while. It probably reminded me the most of something like the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games, if I had to compare it to something, meaning everything's turn-based and it moves across the map simultaneously with you. Same goes for combat, with enemies in attack range only attacking if you also do something in their vicinity. But everything allows for a lot more depth than in Mystery Dungeon games. For one, you have a more traditional gear system with armor and weapons. You also have a simple skill tree that allows you to put 3 points per level into your character attributes, a point into your class skills, and a point into your race skills. It definitely isn't the deepest system, but that doesn't mean it doesn't allow for a lot of customization. The skills are paired into small groups, allowing you to skill into later ones if you put at least 1 point into the prior one and having reached the required level. And the game definitely has a certain kind of flow to it. With you running through dungeons, completing quests, finding new gear with way too much text to actually comprehend them, thank God for the item comparison hotkey, leveling up, unlocking new skills and repeat. But now the question is, where is the Necromancy? You couldn't pick it in the class section. The Sorcerer class also doesn't have any Necromancy themed spells, only ones themed around golem summoning. So how do you get the... Oh no. This game isn't just a one-and-done RPG, it actually also has roguelite mechanics with permadeath, with it being able to unlock new classes and races by playing the game and exploring the world. So what exactly is the requirement for the Necromancer? You have to find 4 lore tomes, titled How to Become a Necromancer. After you have done that, you have to visit the graveyard, kill the Necromancer that resides there, and voila! Necromancer unlocked. Here comes the problem. Everything in the game is RNG. That doesn't only include dungeon layouts and stuff, but it also includes locations of lore tomes, and yeah, no, I'm already way too slow on making these videos, and I'd like to release at least a few of them a year, if you don't mind. I've even read something about some guy taking like 800 hours to find all of the tomes, so sorry, but we sadly have to skip this one. Unless you are such a cool and awesome hacker man as I am and know how to go into the game files to alter them.
I went on a Reddit thread which showed a link to a website with a mod that instantly unlocks all the classes and races in the game.
And now we can actually play as the class. Thanks to this, I also found out there is a skeleton race you can play as, showing off another really cool thing about the game. Every race has their completely unique upbringing. With the elves, you are split into the more magical oriented ones, the Shaelor, and the more physical oriented ones, the Thaelor. For example, choosing a Shaelor starts you out in a cave, and the mission to find a camp of rogue elves that have to be eliminated before they can spread chaos, due to the Shaelor already being seen in a bad light thanks to them being blamed for a massive calamity in the lore. And the skeleton race having their beginning be around being a failed summon by a necromancer that retained its will and therefore killed its creator to, in my case, create an even better Necromancy Imperium. Or the stories differ after that point? I don't know. My Shaelor character died to a way too strong enemy that I found behind a closed door inside of a rogue hideout. Man, I'd love the ability to read. And yeah, you have a few extra tries, but after that, it's over. New character it is. You thankfully can also customize your playthrough in difficulty, and if you even want permadeath, the game is recommending for it to be turned on, but I already established I can't read, so it's off for this beautiful fella over here. And the necromancy experience in this game is really fun. I definitely understand why it's an unlockable class with how much easier some things feel. The game definitely becomes a lot less scary in the beginning if you aren't just running around alone, but with a big army of spoopy boys that just continues to grow with your level. I definitely wouldn't have minded a bigger selection of summons to choose from, but that doesn't mean what's there isn't cool. You obviously have the classics like Call of the Crypt, the skeleton summoning spell, Shattered Remains that makes your skellies explode on death, Assemble, which fuses some of your minions into a stronger one, and Lord of Skulls, which buffs one of your skeletons into a way stronger version with more abilities and health. But the ones that aren't just listening to this video in the background probably noticed that that's just the first category in this. There's also the Master of Flesh section, where you can get zombies and ghoul skills that work completely differently. Like the first one, Call of the Mausoleum, being a passive skill that automatically summons a ghoul after enough turns have passed, with you being able to force activate the spell to summon multiple ones instantly around you on higher levels. And if you also want to partake a little bit more actively in the fighting, you don't have to worry as well. There's a plethora of fun spells you can throw at the enemies in this game. The passives are actually also really interesting. I was able to get a skill thanks to being a skeleton that just straight up increases my physical stats, and then there's Blurred Mortality, which now is a skill I wish would be in every Necromancy video game, with it lowering my maximum life, but I do not die until I reach minus 260% health, while also getting higher resistances while I'm in the negative. And there's even more skill sections you can unlock by playing the game. I also just love how the game works with its mana system. While I was playing as Maj'eyal, I was an alchemist as my class, and they didn't just require mana to cast their spells, I also needed gems that I turned into basically magic ammunition to use as a catalyst for my spells. And the same goes for the Necromancer, with them requiring souls to summon the undead, which luckily are way easier to gain than those gems as well, with you know, constantly releasing souls from their mortal shells. The game definitely offers quite a lot, and I now definitely understand why so many people wanted me to play this. Honestly, I wish the game would get a version for Switch or something in a slightly modernized form to make it more suitable for controllers, while also maybe simplifying a few of its UI elements to make them a bit more readable. Maybe this game is what finally is going to get me over the edge to buy a Steam Deck. I just know I would play this game like every 3 seconds and perform bad while watching a movie or something. It really is the perfect dungeon crawler you can play on the side, while still requiring enough brainpower on the higher difficulty settings to not get boring. Like, I'm literally playing this right now while writing the script, and that's why the game is going right into A tier. Really? Another Diablo clone IRPG? How many do you want to feature on this list? Yeah, you're kinda right. It definitely is just another Diablo-like ARPG. Even while being an actually really good one, you have to admit they all have their similarities in how they work, play, and especially with how the Necromancer class works. So how about we spice it up with something different? Mods! Grim Dawn has a really cool multi-class system where you can choose a second class after level 20 to mix with your first. And with all the DLC, you have access to the Necromancer, so you can make pretty funny creations with that alone. But how about we add a mod into the mix that gives you access to every class from Diablo 3, and actually even the Diablo Immortal exclusive class of Blood Knight, meaning you can multi-class your Necromancer with a Necromancer. Twice the Necromancy, twice the fun, am I right? Yeah, it definitely spices it up thanks to you having access to way more minions than normally, with them also looking and working slightly differently. But to burst the bubble right from the start, you don't really have access to the Diablo 3 Necromancer, but more a class massively inspired by it. They had to drastically alter how some systems, summons, and spells work from Diablo 3 to make them function in Grim Dawn, which led to things like Corpse Explosion to not even be here, and instead you can get a passive skill that can activate an enemy kill that makes them explode, or something like that. Call me stupid if you want, but I could swear that some of these skills don't work as intended, or at least don't feel the way they are supposed to. I'm definitely also not the biggest fan of how the skill tree works in general. It basically is very similar to how the passive tree in Last Epoch works, but instead of unlocking later perks by having spent enough on earlier ones, you have to feed skill points into an entirely separate bar on the bottom that then allows you to spend points on the skills. I just don't like this approach as much, because it takes away from your points and makes it, in my opinion, unnecessarily take longer. Yeah, you get 3 points per level, but I'd much rather have just 1 per level, but every point actually goes towards actively improving and unlocking actives and passives. You definitely also can feel the game's age, and not in a sense that it's somehow aged poorly or something, far from it. Claiming something like games in general is something digital that isn't affected by the passage of time can age is ridiculous in general. There's just certain elements in this game that most ARPGs aren't doing anymore. Like you not really having a quest marker that always shows you where you have to go. You have to basically listen to what the characters have to say, and if you forgot about it, read up about it in the quest menu. The quest marker basically only shows up once you are relatively close to your goal, which again isn't really a bad thing. I love this exact thing in a lot of games. I just personally don't really like it in an ARPG dungeon crawler, where I basically just want to run from one end of a level to the next while annihilating everything that enters my screen. But the game definitely is making it clear that it doesn't want to be played like that. With it probably also being one of the harder ARPGs I've played so far, with requiring a certain level of strategy to some encounters. Dear God, kill the healers, they are going to make your life miserable. The map itself is also really amazing, with it not being separated into chunks, but instead being one massive connected overworld that gets split up by caves and dungeons you can explore to maybe even unlock other paths in every area. With everything thankfully being very well connected by portals, which doesn't mean the system works flawlessly. There are points in this game where I die pretty frequently, which in itself isn't a problem, but it definitely can be because you get sent back to your last town on death. And depending on how far you have gotten since your last portal, this can mean minutes of walking through already cleared out areas just to, in worst case, instantly get one-shotted again and having to walk all the way again. And it's not like that happens frequently or anything, but when it does, it is really frustrating. Especially because the mod also introduced some bosses from Diablo 3, which I found out the hard way. By activating one of these pillars, which are really important because they give you skill points for another tree, where you can unlock vital specializations for your character. I just had to get past this asshole first. And I did. But you already know what I had to go through for that. But for the constellation map, just use a guide. There's a search function, but I didn't really find it useful enough that it's still easier to just Google which ones you should level for certain effects. The game is definitely really fun, and I get why it still, to this day, has such a loyal fan base, with it still getting supported all those years later, and also such a cool mod community. So I'm gonna give the game a B tier. It's 100% worth it, especially with how cheap you can get it now. If there's one thing I haven't expected for this year, then that The Legend of Zelda of all game franchises would get its first new top-down entry since Link Between Worlds from 2013, and that it would center around Zelda being the main playable character for the first time ever. And if that isn't crazy enough, Zelda has the ability to summon every enemy she has killed before. This game was made for me. It also released just a few days after my birthday, so I'm just going to take this as the Nintendo gods having blessed me and heard my prayers. They also used the map of Link to the Past again, while actually expanding heavily on it and adding more of the different races that were introduced in later entries. This is in general also just such a cute game, man. And not only because the art style being all cutesy and like everything is made out of toys, but the story overall just has this wholesome vibe to it. Not the part about the voids opening up and devouring people whole and slowly eating up their life energy until they just vanish. No. The actual personal stories of the characters we meet in every area and the struggles are just nice. And that definitely also describes the game overall. It's nice. It's just nice to have a Zelda again with a more traditional and linear structure. It's just nice how they still managed to build in some of their newer elements that they introduced in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. It is just nice how you are finally able to play as Zelda, and it's just nice how she has a completely different playstyle to Link. The summoning in general is super interesting. You have a little companion, Try, that gave you the ability to summon previously defeated enemies, with them all having their own unique use cases and different summoning costs, which are represented by the amount of triangles they require. At the beginning you have only 3, but you can level that number up, or even lower the cost of some of the monsters by closing the rifts around the map. Meaning you can decide if you want to walk around with one big bodyguard, or with your little army of nuisances that swarm at the enemies. Or you can just partake in the fun yourself and use your magic bar to use Link's sword. But we definitely designed that part to be more of an emergency solution. The game really wants you to experiment with your summons, be it using the monsters for fighting enemies or traversing terrain challenges, or just building staircases with beds. If this list were about the game's quality in general, the game would be an easy S tier. But when I am talking about the necromancy abilities, I would probably give it like a B. But hey, this is my list. I am biased. I literally use the thinnest definition of necromancy as an excuse to talk about Zelda here. Thank you for letting me indulge in it. Hello! Thank you for watching to the end, as always. Sorry, also as always, for again having taken so long for the next episode. There were a few things happening and I hope it's over so that I hopefully am able to make these videos quicker next time. Like in general in the future. But due to it taking so long, I was able to implement a few new things. So I hope you really like all of the new little animations, details, little pop-ups I made, all the new UI stuff. And because it's also now coming up, I hope you also like what is gonna happen next. See you next time.